Coming up, the Cavs take down the Lakers and the Jazz stay hot on the road. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On NBA on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. We have all of our Locked On hosts here. They are ready to recap all of the action for you from last night in the NBA. We're going to start out with the Cleveland Cavaliers, who outscored the Lakers by 20 points in the second half last night. That turned a 6-point halftime deficit into an easy win by the time things got all wrapped up. Both Locked On Cavs and Lakers have more for us from the West Coast.
Hey, what's going on? Chris Manning here from the Locked On Cavs podcast. Big win for the Cavs on Sunday. They beat a team with LeBron James on it, that guy, for the first time since 2011. 2011. It's been over 10 years since they played a team featuring LeBron James and beat it. They also did it with dominant second half defense. Anthony Davis was great in the first half for LA. He took 2 shots in the second half with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen playing fantastic basketball in the second half for Cleveland. On top of that, over 30 points for Donovan Mitchell, 25 plus for Darius Garland. The Cavs are 8-1. Pretty solid Sunday for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Says a lot about where they are, that they're 8-1, that they beat a team with LeBron James on it, that they shut things down in the second half. For more, check out Locked On Cavs wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Andy Kamenetsky, co-host of the Locked On Lakers podcast, and Lakers fall 114-100 to the Cavaliers. The record now at 2-7. The Lakers' offensive woes continue to plague them. They scored only 36 points in the second half. After putting up 36 in the first quarter, they shot 30%, rounding up from behind the arc. 3 of their 8 3-pointers came from Russell Westbrook. Probably not a sustainable formula, having Russ lead the way from distance. 0 points from Anthony Davis in the fourth quarter. And Darvin Ham talked after the game about how guys are starting to have this tendency to hang their heads a bit. Their energy drops, their spirits drop when the shots aren't falling. And you just start to wonder if the weight of having to rely so much on your defense because the offense isn't reliable is starting to catch up with this team psychologically. A lot more to get into, so make sure that you're subscribing to the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel and that you're making Locked On Lakers your first listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Chicago Bulls lost their second game in a row on the road. This time they lost north of the border in Toronto against the Raptors. Our Locked On Bulls host tells you what went wrong as Chicago let the Raptors take the win in the fourth quarter.
The Chicago Bulls take the L to the Toronto Raptors, 113-104. I'm Pat, the designer from Locked On Bulls, and the Bulls take the L tonight behind a defensive game plan that seems simple by just double teaming DeMar DeRozan, but the Bulls could not figure out a way to beat that defense. And of course, Fred VanVleet coming back from injury and absolutely torching tonight for 30 points. I mean, you got to love what you saw out of Fred VanVleet. The Bulls defensively were trying to do the best they could, but just were getting dominated down low. They would force the Raptors into really tough shots all night, but then the second chance points were ridiculous. Saw the Toronto Raptors come away with 27 second chance points over the Bulls and being able to come out of that forcing 17 turnovers. The Raptors really caused havoc for the Bulls. The Bulls get the matchup with them again tomorrow night, and hopefully we will be able to see a different outcome in this one, or at least a better offensive game plan versus that double team. I'm Pat, the designer. Tune in for more in-depth breakdown over on Locked On Bulls with me and Hayes. We'll see you guys over there. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Peace.
A back-and-forth matchup throughout the game ended in a Jazz win over the Clippers on Sunday night. With Utah still riding that hot start to the season, our Locked On Jazz host is really starting to believe that this team could be the real deal.
Add another one to the list of surprising Jazz wins, and at some point this is becoming real. Tonight they do it closing on an 18-6 run against the LA Clippers in LA. Hi, this is David Locke of Locked On Jazz, and the Utah Jazz beat the LA Clippers tonight 110-102 as Mike Conley checked in with 9 minutes left in the ballgame. The Jazz down 4, and the Jazz went on a 23-11 run with Mike on the floor. But more impressively, they finished on an 18-6 run against the Clippers, who came in as one of the best defensive teams in the league. The Clippers go 0 for 11 on three-point shooting in that fourth quarter, as they seem to have worn down a bit as the game went on. The Jazz have now notched road wins against the Wolves, Pelicans, and Clippers. They've beat six playoff teams from last year already this year, on their way to an 8-3 start. And it was balanced scoring again. Colin Sexton deserving much of the credit late for his clutch play.
Out here at the Staples Center as the Clippers just lost a close one to the Utah Jazz. It was a close game throughout. No team could create separation. Another big night from Paul George. He finished with 34 points, but ultimately in the fourth quarter, the Clippers, who were already cold from three, just kept throwing them up there from deep and could not get anything to fall. Paul George could not make his threes, and the Utah Jazz were getting much easier shots around the basket and ultimately came up with the win. The Clippers go to 5-5, even though they had a solid night from John Wall. Reggie Jackson did come up with a little injury. He only played 20 minutes in this game. Robert Covington also returned from health and safety protocols, but it did not matter. The Utah Jazz, off to an amazing start to the season, defeat the Clippers and beat both LA teams here at the Staples Center in a very successful trip to Los Angeles.
The Grizzlies stay undefeated at home on the young season by taking care of the Wizards yesterday. Locked On Grizzlies reviews the final from Memphis.
If you're a fan of the Memphis Grizzlies, you better be enjoying some kiwi tonight. And even if you're not a fan of the brown, fuzzy fruit that is a little bit green and has tiny little seeds, it makes a ton of sense if you watched Memphis get away with a victory that maybe they shouldn't have grabbed against Washington. I'm Joe Mullinax of Locked On Grizzlies. And Steven Adams, also known as the Big Kiwi from down in New Zealand, is a massively important part of this team. Don't believe me? The Grizzlies were up 15 at the start of the third quarter when Steven Adams had to sit down with an ankle injury. And from that point on, the Washington Wizards were not afraid to go at the paint and completely and totally attack Memphis because they had no other bigs, with Jaren Jackson Jr. already out, at least 7-footers. Steven Adams returns to the game in the fourth quarter, helps stabilize the Memphis Grizzlies. John Morant gets hot, and the offense carries them to victory. So Desmond Bane will once again get some credit, but don't forget about the Big Kiwi. He was major.
That's all for today on Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On NBA and your favorite teams Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.